Have you ever felt as if fear was holding you by the hands, hindering your steps, suffocating your voice, blocking your dreams? As if something inside you whispers every day, "You won't make it. You'll fail, you'll get hurt." And even when you try to react, pray, believe. Does this fear seem even stronger, like a shadow that won't let go of your heart? If this feeling accompanies you, you need to stay until the end, because something very profound will be revealed now. Jesus speaks to you, and what he has to say today will touch a part of your soul that perhaps no one has touched before. Most people live oppressed by this invisible fear and don't even realize it. But today you will realize there is a truth that has been ignored by many, but not anymore. Because this truth has the power to break the spiritual and emotional paralysis you have been feeling. And it's not just a theory. It's something that Jesus has already shown in the Bible, and today it will be revealed to you. Imagine the scene. You wake up, the world is silent, but inside you there is a storm. The mind races, the heart is heavy, and even with all the efforts, it seems that trusting God completely has become too difficult. Maybe you've already tried. You've cried and prayed. You've asked, "Lord, help me to trust. Help me not to feel so afraid." And the answer didn't come the way you expected. And then that feeling hit. Does God really listen to me? If this makes sense to you, know one thing. You are not alone. What you feel is not weakness. It's not a lack of faith. It's human. And it is precisely at this point that Jesus wants to reach you today. This video is no longer just one piece of content. It is a divine invitation. Jesus speaks to you now. He wants to show that there is a way to overcome this paralyzing fear and experience real, unshakable confidence that does not depend on external circumstances. What will you hear here will transform the way you deal with fear and how you see God. We are not talking about nice words. We are talking about real liberation. Take a deep breath, open your heart, because Jesus can speak directly to you today. And if this message is already touching something inside you, enjoy the video right now. It helps this word reach other lives that are also crying out for liberation. And say in the comments with faith and courage, "I trust in Jesus." Your comment could be the encouragement someone needs to not give up today. Take a deep breath and open your heart to this message. You are not here by chance. Jesus brought you to this video because there is something he needs to reveal to your heart, something that goes beyond words, something that can release the weight you have been carrying in silence. There is a spiritual movement happening now, invisible to the eye, but real in your soul. Feel it. There's a voice whispering inside you, and maybe it's the first time you'll really listen. Jesus speaks to you, and what he's about to say could change everything. But before continuing, I want you to allow yourself to actively participate in this moment. Comment below with faith and courage, "I trust in Jesus." This simple act can be more than a sentence. It can be a declaration of faith, a spiritual key, a seed of liberation. What's more, your comment could be exactly what someone else needed to read to not give up on life today. Don't underestimate the power of your voice. If this message is already touching your heart, click the like button. When you do this, you are helping this word reach more lives who also need healing, peace, and liberation. Every like, every comment, every share becomes acts of faith, gestures of evangelization, signs that Jesus is still speaking today. It's not just a video, it's a mission, and you are part of it. Get ready, because God can speak directly to you today, and Jesus warned something very important about this situation, something you need to hear before leaving this video. What's coming may change the way you see everything. So take another breath and come with me, because now the journey begins. Imagine being faced with something you never thought you would face. A calling, a direct invitation from God. But instead of enthusiasm, what settles in the heart is a fear that freezes. Moses was like that. He was not a warrior. He was not an eloquent speaker. He was not a crowd leader. He was just an ordinary man, marked by a past of failure and fleeing Egypt for years. And it is precisely in this place, in the middle of the desert, that something supernatural happens. A bush that burned without being consumed. A fire that did not destroy but called. And from within the flame, a voice. A voice that did not condemn. A voice called by name, "Moses, Moses!" His answer came with reverence, "Here I am." But what followed next was not courage. It was fear. A fear so real, so intense, that Moses, upon hearing God's purpose for him, could only say, "Who am I to go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?" Exodus 3:11. The fear of the unknown, the fear of not being ready, the fear of failing in the face of something too big. Have you ever felt this? Have you ever had the impression that God called you to something, but you just froze because everything inside you said, "I can't do it"? Invisible fear has this power. He doesn't scream, he whispers. He convinces you with smooth words and convincing arguments that you don't have what it takes, that others can, but you can't, that the past is too big, that the limitations are too heavy. And you believe so much that you start to run away from what you should embrace. Moses fled for years, and even in the face of a visible miracle, he still tried to resist. Fear does that. It prevents us from seeing what God is already doing. It blinds us to the presence of Jesus in the midst of the burning bush of our own lives. But there is a detail in this story that many don't realize. God did not choose Moses despite his insecurities. He chose precisely because of them. God knew exactly who he was talking to. I knew about the past, the limitations, the escape, the fears. And yet he called him, because what qualifies someone for God's purpose is not strength. It is obedience. It's not the preparation. It's the disposition. Jesus speaks to you now, and maybe you are just like Moses, feeling like it's not enough, that the calling is too big for who you are. But what God said to Moses echoes today. "Surely I will be with you." This certainly changes everything. It's not a maybe. It's not "I'll think about it." It's a promise, a seal, a divine assurance that you are not alone. Fear can try to convince you that you can't do it. But Jesus speaks to you, and what he says is, "I am with you." And that is enough. It's not about what you feel. It's about who walks with you. And when you understand this, fear begins to lose its power because the focus stops being on you and starts being on God. Now take a deep breath and think, how many opportunities have you let slip away because of fear? How many times have you felt God gently pushing you into something new and you got stuck? Not out of malice, not out of rebellion, but because I was simply too scared to try. If this touches you, it is because there is something here that Jesus wants to free. The fear that paralyzes the soul, that suffocates dreams, that buries the purpose. This fear was not born in you. It was planted by experiences, for words that diminished you, for rejections, because of trauma. But Jesus speaks to you now and says, the time has come to uproot that root. What you are about to discover will change the way you see everything, because there is something hidden in this encounter between Moses and God, something that has been ignored by many. Moses was not chosen just to free a people. He was chosen to prove that God uses the unlikely, the fragile ones, those who tremble before the call. And yet, God fulfills everything he promised. Fear says, "Who am I?" But God responds with, "I am that I am." In other words, it doesn't matter who you are, it matters who is with you. This is the key that unlocks the paralysis, when you understand that you don't need to be strong, just obedient. Fear loses its power. Have you ever seen yourself like Moses? Have you ever felt too small in the face of too big a calling? Have you ever doubted your voice, your ability, your story? So listen, Jesus speaks to you and he says, "Do not be afraid. I will be with you." This presence is what changes everything. It is not the absence of challenges. It's the certainty that even when the ground seems to disappear, he remains by your side. And when God is with you, the impossible is no longer a threat. It's a promise under construction. If this word is touching something deep within you, boldly declare in the comments, "Jesus is my strength." Your statement can be a spiritual key, a seed that opens doors in your life. What's more, your comment could be the encouragement someone else needs today. Someone may be on the verge of giving up, and reading their written faith can reignite a flame. Don't underestimate the power of your delivery. Jesus speaks to you and through you, and if this message is speaking to you so clearly, so directly, click the like button now. When you do this, you are allowing this word to reach others who are also silent, held back by fear, needing to hear that God still calls, even the most unlikely. Enjoy the video as an act of faith, as a gesture of evangelization, like a digital "here I am." And if you're not yet subscribed to the channel, do so now. Not just to receive more content like this, but to be part of a community that chose to walk with Jesus, even in fear. But that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. Because sometimes fear doesn't just paralyze our steps, it silences our faith. And when that happens, even looking at Jesus, we can start to sink, and here comes the most impressive part of this journey. The wind was strong, the waves crashed violently, and the heart, once full of faith, now trembled. Peter had asked for something unthinkable, to get out of the boat and walk on the water towards Jesus. And for a moment he did. His feet touched the impossible. He broke the limits of logic, physics, and superficial faith, but all it took was a second of distraction, an instant of doubt, for everything to fall apart. When Peter took his eyes off Jesus and focused on the strength of the wind, the noise of the waves, the threat around him, he began to sink. Not because of a lack of capacity, but because of a lack of focus. And there, between fear and the sea, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" And immediately, Jesus reached out his hand, took hold of Peter and said, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Matthew 14:31. This question crosses time and touches our hearts today, because how often are we exactly like Peter? We start with faith, we take bold steps, but when circumstances scream, fear silences our faith. Fear has this silent ability to slow the spirit. He doesn't stop you from believing, but he makes you doubt along the way. And doubt, when fed, sucks faith until its last breath. Maybe you've already experienced this. Moments when everything seemed fine, you felt like you were at the center of God's will. The heart at peace, the steady walk. But suddenly the storm came, a diagnosis, a loss, a betrayal, a closed door, and like Peter, his eyes stopped looking at Jesus and started looking at chaos. This is when faith wavers, not because it ceased to exist, but because it was stifled by fear. Jesus speaks to you now, and his question keeps echoing. Why did you doubt? Faith, when it is genuine, is not the absence of fear. It is the presence of focus. Pedro didn't make a mistake because he was afraid. You made the mistake of looking in the wrong place. While their eyes were fixed on Jesus, the impossible happened. But when he looked at the waves, he lost his ground. This teaches us something profound. Fear is not born from the problem itself. It comes from focusing on the problem, and that changes everything. Because if what paralyzes us is where we fix our eyes, then there is a way out, there is a way back. And this path begins with a look that turns away from the chaos and returns to Jesus. Have you ever felt like you're sinking? Have you ever had that feeling that your faith is weakening and the doubt is gaining ground? Have you ever looked around and felt like you can't go on any longer? So listen, Jesus speaks to you, and he is reaching out now. He doesn't expect you to get back to the boat alone. He comes to you even in the middle of the storm, even when your faith is small. Because what matters to Jesus is not the size of your faith, it is the direction of your cry. Peter didn't say a beautiful prayer. He just shouted, "Save me," and that was enough. If this word is touching your heart, write in the comments, "Jesus, save me too." This may be the most sincere prayer you have ever prayed, and your comment could be the cry that someone else needs to see to remember that there is still hope. Your vulnerability can save someone from emotional drowning. You are not alone in this storm. Jesus speaks to you, and he is here now. But that's not all. Something even deeper is about to be revealed, because there are times when we are not in the middle of the storm, but the storm is within us. And even when everything around seems calm, the heart is restless, anxious, distressed. And that's where Jesus' voice whispers most powerfully. The house was full. It was Jesus who arrived. Expectation filled the room. And in the midst of the commotion, two women, two sisters, two ways to deal with the presence of God. Mary sat at Jesus' feet, quiet, available, delivered. Martha was busy, running from one place to the other, trying to take care of everything. She was a good hostess. I wanted everything to be perfect. But inside she was anxious, restless, suffocated. At a certain point, Martha lost control of her frustration. She could no longer contain what was boiling inside. He interrupted Jesus and almost accusingly said, "Lord, do you not mind that my sister leaves me to serve alone? So tell her to help me." And Jesus answered tenderly but firmly, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but only one is necessary. Mary has chosen the good part, and it will not be taken away from her." Luke 10:41-42. This speech by Jesus is like a mirror for many hearts today. We live in a noisy, busy world, full of demands, and we are constantly pressured to do, produce, solve. But like Martha, often the body is moving, but the soul is tired. Anxiety is not just born from an excess of problems. Often it comes from excessive internal demands. The need to prove value, to show control, to be useful, to be strong all the time. And in this race, we lost the essential thing, presence. Martha wasn't bad. She loved Jesus, but her mind was so busy trying to serve God that she strayed from the most important place, his feet. Anxiety does that. She convinces you that everything depends on you, that if you stop, everything falls apart, that if you don't realize it, no one will. And here is a profound revelation. Anxiety is often a cry of the heart, trying to maintain control over that which only God can govern. And Jesus speaks to you now, just as he spoke to Martha. He doesn't scold you for feeling too much. He does not condemn you for being overwhelmed. But he invites you to change your focus, sitting down, listening, to trust. The world asks you for more action. Jesus offers you more presence. While anxiety pulls you to 1,000 tasks, the voice of Jesus calls you to just one thing, being with him. Have you ever felt like Martha? Running non-stop, trying to figure everything out, but inside, feeling like you're about to break? Have you ever had moments when it seemed like everyone was receiving peace, except you? That others knew how to rest in God, but you couldn't? So take a deep breath now and listen. Jesus speaks to you. He sees your rush. He knows your tiredness. And he's saying, you don't have to do so much to be loved. You just need to be with me. This is the key that Maria understood. She stopped everything. He sat down, silenced the body to listen to the soul. And at that moment, his life was marked, because there are things that can only be received at the feet of Jesus. Not in the rush, but in silence. Not in performance, but in delivery. Anxiety loses strength when the presence of God gains space. This is not poetry. It's healing, real healing. Healing for the mind, for the heart, for the exhausted soul that tries to be strong all the time. If this message spoke to your heart, comment now. Jesus, I choose the good part. This statement may seem simple, but it is a spiritual key that repositions your soul. What's more, your comment could be the breath of hope that someone needs to let go of the weight they carry and finally sit at the feet of Jesus. And if this message touched your heart, click the like button so that others can also be blessed. When you like this video, you are allowing the Word of God to reach more lives trapped in anxiety, like Martha. Your like isn't just a gesture, it's an act of faith. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and come be part of this community that is learning to rest in the arms of Jesus. But what if I told you that, even in the face of anxiety, there is something deeper that could be holding you back? There is a root that silently imprisons many hearts. And here comes the most impressive part of this story, because the pain of not feeling enough, even trying to do your best, has stolen many people's identity. And what you're about to discover will change the way you see what God sees when He looks at you. It was night in Israel, but inside that winepress, hidden from the view of others, there was more than darkness. There was a man trying to hide even from himself. Gideon threshed wheat in a place where only grapes were treaded, an improvised hiding place, symbol of a soul that, crushed by oppression and fear, no longer saw any value in itself. His people were being massacred, plundered, humiliated, and he, even though he wanted to fight, hid. He felt too small, too weak, too insignificant. And in the midst of this emotional escape, the most unlikely visitation occurred. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and declared something that seemed too absurd to be true. "The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor." Judges 6:12. Gideon's mind couldn't process it. How could someone like him be called brave? How could someone who hid be seen as a warrior for God? This is the first great revelation of this meeting. God does not speak based on what you feel. He speaks based on what He sees. Gideon saw himself as the smallest. God saw him as a liberator. Gideon felt weak. God called him strong. Gideon was hidden. God saw him positioned. This reveals something tremendous. The identity God gives you does not depend on your circumstances, but on the purpose He has placed in you. How many times have you hidden emotionally? Have you ever hidden behind excuses, insecurities, past traumas? How many times have you looked around and concluded that you don't have what it takes? Who wasn't born for great things? That you will always be last in line? Gideon thought so too. He said, "How can I deliver Israel? Behold, my family is the poorest in Manasseh, and I am the youngest in my father's house." Judges 6:15. And here is one of the most impactful answers in the Bible. The Lord answered, "Surely I will be with you." Jesus speaks to you now, and perhaps this is exactly the phrase your soul needs to hear most. I will be with you. Because it's not about being the biggest, the strongest, the most prepared. It's about who walks with you. When God is with you, even the smallest become giants. Even the forgotten become chosen. Even the weak become instruments of liberation. It's not a pretty theory. It is a spiritual reality that redefines your history. The fear of not being enough imprisons thousands of hearts every day. People who carry old guilt, harsh words spoken in childhood, toxic comparisons, wounds that have never healed. And inside, they believe, "I'm not good enough." Only Jesus speaks to you now, and He is saying, "You are what I say you are." Your identity is not determined by your performance, but by God's word about your life. And when He calls you, He has already provided everything you need. Even if you don't see it yet, even if you don't feel it yet, the empowerment has already been released in the spiritual world. If this word is confronting you and at the same time healing you, comment now with faith. Jesus calls me by name. This commentary is more than a text. It is an act of agreement with heaven, and it could be the encouragement that another soul needs to come out of emotional hiding and understand that God still chooses the unlikely. But that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. Because there are times when the pain is not from feeling small, but from feeling alone in the middle of the darkness. And what comes next will touch a part of your heart that you may have hidden even from yourself. What you are about to discover will change the way you view even the silence of God. It was a sound that no one heard. It wasn't thunder nor an earthquake. It was the sound of a tired soul hidden in a cave. Elijah, the prophet who had already faced kings, defeated prophets of Baal, seen fire fall from the sky, now cowered alone, afraid and exhausted, asking for death. Enough is enough, Lord. Take my life, because I am no better than my parents. 1 Kings 19:4. It's as if he said, I tried, I fought, but now I can't. And who hasn't felt this way, strong on the outside for a long time, until inside all that's left is the desire to disappear, to run away, no longer needing to be anyone's strength. Elijah thought he was alone. He thought God had abandoned him, that their efforts had been in vain, that nothing made sense anymore. But it is exactly there, at the bottom of the cave, at the bottom of the pain, that God appears in a totally unexpected way. The Bible says that a strong wind came, but the Lord was not in the wind. Then an earthquake came, but the Lord was not in the earthquake either. And then a fire, but God wasn't in the fire either. And then a gentle breeze came, silent, almost imperceptible, but it was there in lightness that the Lord was. 1 Kings 19:11-12. This changes everything, because sometimes we expect God to appear with noise, with spectacle, with immediate answers. But he chooses the breeze. He chooses the whisper. He chooses to reveal himself when everything calms down, or when everything inside us has screamed too much. Jesus speaks to you now, and perhaps your cave today is not made of stone, but of thoughts, of silence, of deep tiredness, from sleepless nights, of prayers that you no longer even know how to say. And he is saying, I never left you. I was in the breeze. I was there when you thought you were alone. I was there when you held back tears in the crowd. I was there when no one noticed your pain. I always have been. Elijah's pain was not just physical, it was emotional. It was spiritual. It was the weight of being strong for so long, to face everything, not to fall, not to weaken. But even the greatest prophets reach their limits, and this is not a failure. It's humanity. God did not reject Elijah because he was tired. On the contrary, God fed him. It strengthened him, reoriented him. Because Jesus does not abandon you in the valley, he enters the cave with you, and he speaks in silence. He restores what no one sees. He lifts what seemed irreversible. If this message is touching your heart, write in the comments, Jesus, come into my cave. This phrase could be the beginning of a new journey for someone. It could be the moment of liberation for those who thought loneliness was definitive. Your comment could be the breath of faith someone needed to not give up today. But that's not all. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. Because there are pains that are not born from the now, but from the fear of repeating the past. There are people who are not afraid of the future, but are terrified of failing again. And what you're about to discover will change the way you see even your failures. Peter was no longer in the upper room, not even in a crowd. He was in the same place where it all started, at the edge of the sea, surrounded by nets, rafts, and fish. It was as if he had returned to point zero in his story, trying to erase with time what still burned inside, the memory of his betrayal. 3 times, 3 denials. 3 moments when fear was louder than faith and shame stronger than love. Peter had failed, not in any situation, but with Jesus, with the one who loved him unconditionally. And now, even after the resurrection, even knowing that the tomb was empty, Peter still carried within him a much greater emptiness, the fear of failing again, the fear of no longer being worthy, of no longer having a place, of having been replaced, discarded. But Jesus had other plans. In that same scenario where Peter thought the story had ended, Jesus appears, and not with an accusation, but with an invitation. Feed my sheep, John 21:17. Jesus doesn't just forgive Peter, he restores him, reintegrates him, rebuilds him. Jesus doesn't ask, why did you deny me? He asks, do you love me? Because for Jesus, love is greater than failure. Love heals, redeems, realigns. And that's when everything changes. Maybe you feel like Peter today. Maybe he returned to old places thinking it was safer there. Maybe you feel like God gave up on you because of mistakes you made. Maybe the fear of falling again is stopping you from taking the next step. But Jesus speaks to you now, And he says, I still want you. There's still a call on your life. It's not too late. You're not cancelled. You're chosen. The fear of failing again paralyzes. He makes us go in circles, repeat patterns, retreat when we should advance. But fear only gains strength when we forget who is calling us. Jesus doesn't call you because you are perfect. He calls you because he knows your heart. And if he restored Peter, who denied him before everyone, he can restore you too. It doesn't matter how unworthy, broken, or insecure you feel. This story teaches us that it is not the end that defines you. It's the answer you give when Jesus asks you, do you love me? Pedro answered yes. And with that, he changed the course of his own life. The same man who denied it then boldly announced the gospel. The same one who cried in secret began to declare Jesus in front of the crowds. The fear did not disappear, but he was overcome by love. If this word spoke to you, comment now, Jesus, lift me up. Your answer could be the first step towards emotional healing for those who also fear failing again. You are not alone. And your vulnerability can spark hope in another soul, but that's not all. Because there is guilt that does not arise from an isolated mistake, but from a whole life marked by difficult decisions, by pasts that no one knows about. And what happens next will challenge everything you believe about worthiness and grace. He was feared, respected. He had a voice of command, knowledge, power, but he carried the blood of innocence on his hands. His name was Saul, a stalker, a man who believed he was doing the right thing by silencing those who spoke about Jesus. A man who used his strength and intelligence to fulfill what he thought was his mission. But behind the authority, there was darkness. Behind the conviction, there was confusion. And behind the religious armor, there was guilt, a guilt hidden under layers of justifications, traditions, rules. Until, on the way to Damascus, something unexpected happened. A light stronger than the sun knocked him down. A voice broke through logic, doctrine, reason. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Acts 9:4. It was Jesus, and in that moment, what seemed like an end became a new beginning. Guilt is an invisible prison. It doesn't need bars or sentences. All it takes is a memory, an unresolved regret, a mistake that continues to echo in your thoughts as if it had happened yesterday. And the guilt that paralyzes us is the one that convinces us that we are no longer worthy of starting over. But Jesus speaks to you now, and he says, I see who you were, but I also see who you can be. Because that's what he did with Saul. He did not ignore Paul's past. He redeemed him. He turned a persecutor into a preacher, an accuser in an instrument of grace. Jesus didn't just forgive. He entrusted Paul with a new mission. This is a chosen vessel for me. This changes everything, because it shows that not even the deepest mistakes can stop God's plan, that the shame that haunts you can be the ground for your greatest transformation, that what the world sees as failure, God sees as fertile soil for purpose. Your pain is not your end. It's the beginning of something bigger if you give it to Jesus. And perhaps today you carry guilt that no one knows about. Decisions that took you away from who you wanted to be, words you said, opportunities you missed, relationships you destroyed. But Jesus speaks to you. He still calls you a vase. There is still a destiny. There is still purpose. You are not your mistake. You are what Jesus can do from him. Paul was not transformed because he was good, but because Jesus is good. And that grace is available to you now. It doesn't matter what they did to you or what you did. The blood of Jesus is enough to cleanse, renew, start over. If this message spoke to your heart, comment, Jesus transforms me. Your answer may open the path to healing for someone who feels paralyzed by guilt. Your testimony starts here now, but that's not all. There is an even more surprising story where little becomes abundance, and the fear of scarcity is defeated by the courageous faith of someone who only had a handful of flour and a drop of olive oil. What happens next will change the way you view God's provision. The scenario is bleak. A widowed woman, mother with no one to turn to. She walks towards the end with heavy steps and empty hands. A hand holds a handful of flour, the other a little olive oil, enough for one last meal with their son before they embrace death together. This was the reality of the widow of Zarephath at the height of hunger and scarcity, and as if the burden wasn't enough, a stranger appears, a man of God, and asks for the most precious thing she has, her last portion of food. The voice of fear screams, "If you give, you will lack." But something about that request carries divine weight. Elijah didn't come to get it. He came to reveal it. Do not be afraid. Go and do according to your word, but do it first for me. For thus says the Lord, the flour in the pot will not run out, and the oil in the jar will not run out. 1 Kings 17:13-14. How many times have you been in this position, with little in your hands and scarcity screaming inside your soul? The fear of lack is suffocating, worrying about the bills, what will happen tomorrow, the children, the rent, the food. All of this crushes the heart and generates a type of anxiety that paralyzes. But here's something that could change everything. Jesus talks to you, and what he asks of you is not because he needs what you have. It is because he wants to show you who he is. The widow had nothing, but she discovered that when God enters the story, little turns into a miracle. Faith is delivered before multiplication. Trust comes before provision. And it is in this interval, between giving and receiving, that we are shaped. The great truth is that God is not indifferent to your scarcity. He uses it as a setting for his manifestation. When you choose to believe, even in fear, you make room for the supernatural. And if you feel like you're about to break, remember, God uses the broken to multiply. He doesn't expect you to have much. He just expects you to trust. The flour that doesn't run out, the oil that doesn't dry out. These are more than symbols of provision. They are proof that even when the world says it is over, God says, I am. If you are facing times of scarcity, declare in the comments, Jesus is my supply, and allow faith to be reborn in someone who is feeling alone in this battle. You have not been forgotten. And here comes the most impressive part of this journey. An unexpected reunion between two brothers marked by past conflicts, showing that even broken ties can be restored when God gets in the way. What you're about to discover will change the way you view reconciliation and a fresh start. The reunion between Jacob and Esau was not just the outcome of a conflict between brothers. It was the culmination of an internal journey marked by guilt, fear, and shame. Years earlier, Jacob had fled after deceiving his brother and taking his blessing. Now he returned, vulnerable, tired, with a family to protect and a heart divided between the desire for reconciliation and the fear of retaliation. The past was heavy. The fear of starting over, of trying to fix what was broken, of opening up again, is something that paralyzes even the bravest souls. Jacob sent gifts, separated caravans, prayed. But inside, he trembled. It wasn't just fear of Esau. It was fear of facing what he had become, fear of starting over without guarantees, to rebuild a bridge where there were only ruins. And then Esau runs, but not with a sword. Run with open arms, and what seemed impossible happens. They cry, they hug, they forgive each other. I saw your face as if I had seen the face of God, Genesis 33:10. This statement by Jacob is not poetic exaggeration. It is the realization that sometimes God reveals himself in the places we least expect, in the forgiveness we offer, in the hug we receive, in the courage to try again. How many times have you postponed a fresh start for fear of failing again, of being rejected again? Not realizing it, Jesus speaks to you. And today, he wants you to know it's not too late. The fear of starting over often hides a lie that you need to be completely healed to start over. But God does not wait for your perfection. He just waits for your willingness. Grace does not rewrite the past, but redefines the future. And just like Jacob, perhaps you need to go through your own valley of Jabbok, that place of internal struggle where you encounter yourself, but especially God. It was there that he became Israel. It was there that his identity was transformed. The fresh start does not begin with a change of scenery. It starts with a change within you. If this word touched your heart and you feel it is time to start over, even if you are afraid, write in the comments, "I choose to start over with Jesus." Your testimony may rekindle hope in someone who is also afraid to try again. But that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. A story that shows that sometimes the greatest miracle happens when we learn to let go of control and trust, even without understanding what God is doing. What you're about to discover will transform the way you deal with the unexpected. Imagine the scene: a father who has waited decades for a promise. Abraham, already old, finally holds his long-awaited son Isaac in his arms. A miracle. A laugh born of impossibility. But then God makes a request that seems impossible to obey. Offer your son as a sacrifice. How can we continue to believe when God seems to ask for what we love most? How can we hand over control when our entire heart is at stake? Abraham climbs Mount Moriah with Isaac, wood on his back, silence in his steps, and faith in crisis. Every meter of that path screams in your soul, what if this is the end? What if I lose everything? What if I'm wrong? But he goes up anyway, because true faith is not the absence of fear. It's a decision to continue even with your heart in pieces. Genesis 22:8 brings the phrase that breaks the silence and still resonates strongly to this day: God will provide. This was not a phrase to console Isaac. It was the anchor of Abraham's soul. It was the desperate cry of someone who decided to trust, even when everything inside him wanted to escape. And the most impressive thing is that at the exact moment, neither before nor after, God intervenes. He sees, he acts, he proves it. How many times do you try to hold everything in your hands because you are afraid of what will happen if you let God lead? How many sleepless nights trying to anticipate disasters, control results, predict failures, avoid pain? Jesus speaks to you. The fear of losing control reveals where we still don't trust completely, but genuine faith begins when we let go of what we try most to control. God is not interested in taking something away from you. He is interested in teaching you that there is nothing safer than living surrendered to Him. Isaac did not die. Abraham did not lose. On the contrary, there he met the God who sees and provides. And you, what have you been holding on to tightly, afraid that if you let go, it would fall apart? If this message spoke to your heart, comment with faith. I place it in God's hands. Your comment could be exactly the seed of courage someone needs to see today to also surrender their fear. But wait. What happens next will challenge everything you believe about pain, loss, and purpose. A story that proves that even when everything is taken away, God still remains, and He still writes surprising endings. What you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. Imagine losing everything. Family, health, friends, resources, everything. In a single moment, your life disintegrates, and what remains is only the silence of pain. It was like that with Job, a man of integrity, justice, God-fearing, and yet hit by a series of losses that would make anyone go crazy. He didn't just lose things. Job lost people, children, loves, supports. And perhaps deeper than all of this, Job began to feel that he had lost God. Amid the ashes and wounds, surrounded by voices that questioned his faith, he shouted words that sounded all too familiar. Why, God, where are you? Anyone who has experienced the dark valley of loss knows. God's silence can seem more painful than the suffering itself, but there is a powerful moment in Job's story that rescues something within us. When everything seemed to indicate that God was absent, Job declared aloud a truth that defies logic. I know that my Redeemer lives. Job 19:25. It wasn't a statement based on what he felt. It was based on who he knew. Job had no answers. He had no comfort, but he still had faith. And this faith was not fragile. It was an anchor in the chaos. Have you ever felt your faith being tested to the limit? Have you ever experienced a loss so great that even praying seemed futile? Have you ever looked up to the sky and tearfully wondered if God still cared? Jesus speaks to you. When your faith is being crushed by the weight of pain, you are not abandoned. You are being refined. God is not absent in your suffering. He is present in a way that the eyes cannot see. And sometimes He allows the darkness so that you discover a light that would never be visible in comfort. What few say is that the true miracle in Job's life was not the material restitution that came later. It was what God built inside him during the pain. Job's faith did not end with an explanation, but with a revelation. When God finally speaks, He does not explain the whys, but shows the who. And at that moment, Job no longer needed answers. He had found the presence again, because the greatest answer God gives is not a solution. It is Himself. If this message found you in a moment of deep pain, comment, "I know that my Redeemer lives," even if everything says otherwise, even if your soul is in ruins. Declare this in faith, because your testimony can be the spark of hope for someone who is also struggling to believe. But that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. A story where shame gives way to restoration, where humiliation is turned into honor, and where Jesus' gaze transforms a life marked by judgment. What you are about to hear will change the way you view rejection. Imagine someone so despised, so rejected by society, that they are forced to climb a tree just to have a chance to see Jesus. Not to touch Him, not to ask for a miracle, just to see. That someone is Zacchaeus, a man of small stature, but with an even smaller reputation in his community. Publican, tax collector, considered a traitor by his own people. He carried not only the weight of guilt for poor choices, but the constant shame of judgmental looks. He was not just a man of short physical stature, he was an emotionally shrunken man. The fear of what others thought of him became an invisible but devastating prison. And there he is, hanging between branches and doubts, trying to see from afar the one so many were talking about. He didn't expect to be seen, and even less being called. But Jesus stops, "Look up." And He says, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, because today I want to stay at your house." Luke 19:5. He doesn't say, "Zacchaeus, change your life, and then I will come to you." He says, "Today." How is it? With everything the people think, with everything that Zacchaeus himself thinks about himself, Jesus goes to the home of a man considered unworthy. And it is there that the transformation begins. Has the fear of what others will think stopped you from drawing closer to God? Have you ever felt like your story is so tarnished, that your image is so worn out, that it's not worth trying? Jesus speaks to you. He is not looking for perfection. He is looking for a heart willing to come down from the tree of pride, shame, or doubt. When Zacchaeus descends, it is not just his body that moves. It is the soul that surrenders. And what Jesus declares is surprising. Today, salvation has come to this house. Luke 19:9. No condemnation came. There was no sermon. Salvation came. The most striking thing is that while everyone judged Zacchaeus on the outside, Jesus saw what was on the inside. And that look changes everything. When you begin to see yourself through the eyes of Jesus, you stop living as a slave to the opinions of others. The search for other people's approval is an emotional trap that exhausts, paralyzes, and silences. But when you understand that you have been seen by Jesus, really seen, all fear melts away in His presence. If this message touched something deep within you, comment, "Jesus sees me." State this as a truth, because perhaps today you need to be seen by Him more than understood by others. And that truth alone can begin your liberation. But that's not all. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. Jesus' love will reach even those who have been cast down by their own mistakes. And what happens next will change the way you see forgiveness. She was surrounded, Men armed with stones in their hands and hardened hearts in their chests. A woman dragged across the floor, publicly humiliated, condemned for her mistakes. Her sin was no secret. It was a scandal. She had no time to hide, no chance to explain. There was no court, there was no defense, there was no mercy. Just the relentless weight of condemnation. But in the midst of a crowd thirsting for punishment, Jesus bends down. He doesn't shout, he doesn't accuse, he doesn't point the finger. He writes on the floor. In silence, the same earth that witnessed her shame was now the paper on which Jesus wrote something that only heaven understood. And when he stands up, he says something that would echo for eternity. Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone. John 8:7. One by one, the accusers retreat. And what's left? An intimate encounter between the broken and the Redeemer, between the woman marked by guilt and the God marked by love. Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you? She responds with a shaky but relieved voice, No one, Lord. And then he seals the grace. Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. John 8:10-11. How many times have you felt this way? As if your entire past was exposed, as if every mistake you make was a stone aimed at you, as if there was no turning back, no forgiveness, no chance to start over. Maybe you haven't been physically dragged to a square, but emotionally you've already been thrown to the ground by the weight of guilt, rejection, shame. And the worst part, you believed the voices that said you didn't deserve to be loved. But Jesus speaks to you now. He sees beyond your error. He sees your broken heart, the silent cry for forgiveness, the fear of never being accepted again. And he doesn't just free you from guilt, he lifts you off the ground. The love of Jesus is not a speech. It is a gesture, a look, an outstretched hand, a silence that speaks louder than condemnation. There's something about this story that changes everything. Jesus was the only one there who could throw a stone, and he was the only one who didn't. This reveals something that the world still doesn't understand. True love doesn't condemn, it restores. The adulterous woman left there transformed, not because she was judged, but because she was loved. And maybe that's what you need most right now, not someone to tell you how wrong you were, but someone who looks at you and says, I don't condemn you. If this message spoke to your heart, comment, Jesus loves me despite everything. Let this sentence be an act of faith, a statement that defies everything fear and shame have told you to date, and allow yourself to believe that you can still be remade, restored, rebuilt. Because the love that lifts you up is greater than the error that knocked you down, but that's not all. Because there is another truth hidden in the despair of those who cry out in silence. And what comes next may reveal the path to freeing your mind when it can no longer stop. David, the man after God's own heart, had his moments when his soul plunged into darkness. He was not just a warrior, a king, a psalmist. He was also a human being who faced storms in his mind and feelings. In Psalm 13, he begins with an almost choked cry, How long, Lord? Will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? The pain he expresses is not that of someone who is faced with external enemies, but of someone who is fighting within themselves. It is the cry of those who feel that praying is useless, that waiting does not solve the problem, that living is tiring. David describes consuming anguish, sleepless nights, thoughts that don't stop, and a continuous feeling of abandonment, even by God. How many times have you seen yourself like this too? The body is present, but the mind is far away, spinning in circles that don't close. Racing thoughts, unanswered questions, a silence from God that hurts more than anyone's absence. And all you want is to stop thinking, stop suffering, stop feeling. But he can't. The mind has become a windowless prison. And you ask yourself, just like David, how long? This, until when, is the echo of those who have tried to fight with their own strength, of those who have held everything alone for too long. But it is also the beginning of a turning point, because it is precisely when you run out of yourself that you can finally empty yourself for God to act. What few realize is that this psalm, which begins with anguish, ends with praise. In verse 5, David changes the tone, "But I trust in your mercy. My heart will rejoice in your salvation." His mind didn't stop because the situation changed. It stopped because he decided to focus not on what he felt, but on what he knew about God. He was still in the valley, but he started walking with his eyes up. And that's what Jesus speaks to you now. When your mind is full of chaos, empty yourself in prayer. When your thoughts are racing, slow down in his presence. When everything seems like noise, look for the silence of the word. There is a brutal but liberating truth. God does not always calm the storm around us. Sometimes he begins by calming the storm within you. And this process begins when you stop trying to control your thoughts with logic and start surrendering everything with faith. Because not all anxiety can be resolved with explanation. Some can only be cured by surrender. If this message is touching your heart, tell us in the comments, "Lord, calm my mind." May this phrase be your cry for help and at the same time the beginning of your peace. Because when you invite Jesus into your whirlwind, he doesn't just enter, he transforms. His presence doesn't take away the difficult reality, but it completely changes the way you look at it. And here comes the most impressive part of this journey. Because when the mind finds peace, the future shines with hope again. But what's about to be revealed could change the way you see tomorrow. Joshua was faced with a responsibility that would make anyone shudder. Moses, the great leader of Israel, had died, and now all the people were looking at him. It was as if the weight of the world was suddenly on his shoulders. The mission: lead an entire nation towards the promised land. But more than facing armies, Joshua needed to win a silent battle: fear of the future. A fear that didn't scream on the outside, but that echoed inside, fueled by the uncertainty of what was to come. What to do? How to guide so many? What if it failed? What if it wasn't enough? In this scenario of doubt and insecurity, God appears and says something that changes everything. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord, your God, is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. It was not a promise of an easy path, it was a guarantee of constant presence. God did not say everything will be fine, but rather, I will be with you. And that, for those who are sunk in anxiety about tomorrow, completely changes the weight of the journey. Because it's not about knowing each step, but about trusting those who are at your side in each one of them. How many times have you found yourself paralyzed by the fear of what lies ahead? Not because something bad happened, but because you don't know what will happen. The heart tightens, the mind invents catastrophic scenarios, and suddenly, the simple act of waking up the next day seems overwhelming. You try to control everything: agenda, results, people, but deep down you know that tomorrow is not in your hands. And this uncertainty eats away at you. But here's a revelation that can transform the way you see time. God is already in your tomorrow. Before you get there, he is already gone, already prepared, already taken care of. The future that scares you is the present where God is already at work. That's why Jesus speaks to you right now. Fear not, because fear of the future is always fueled by the illusion that you are alone, but you're not. Never was. You may not know what will happen, but you can rest in who is in control. And that is faith. It is not the absence of doubt, it is the presence of trust. It's walking even though you're trembling, it's following even without seeing everything, it's taking the next step because you know who you're standing on. If this message spoke to your heart, comment, I trust in the God who goes ahead. Your public declaration of faith may be the breath of courage that another heart needs to read today. And it's not about having everything resolved. It's about trusting in the midst of chaos. Because God doesn't need you to have all the answers. He just wants you to trust the plan even without the map. And now, pay attention. What happens next will change the way you see God's silence. Because there is a moment when everything seems to stand still, and that is exactly when something supernatural begins to move. The house was silent. The heavy curtains didn't let any light through, and the air was thick as if it carried the weight of death. Lazarus was dead. 3 days. Hopes dissolved with time, with each tick of the clock, with each tear of Martha and Maria. There was nothing else to do. When the news arrived that Jesus was finally coming, it seemed too late. The pain had become a rock in their chest. They no longer expected a miracle, just consolation. And when Martha sees Jesus, her first sentence carries the lament of many hearts today. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. John 11:21. But Jesus didn't come just to console. He came to resurrect what seemed closed. And it is at this moment that he releases one of the most powerful statements in the entire Bible. I am the resurrection and the life. The fear of the end, that's what we're talking about now. Not just physical death, but the end of cycles, relationships, dreams, opportunities. That moment when everything falls apart and you have the impression that God arrived too late. How many times have you thought this? That the answer didn't come when you needed it most. That the door that was supposed to open closed. That the strength you were waiting for didn't come, and you stopped, little by little, moving away. Silently, you got used to mourning something you could still live with. You put a period where God just wanted a comma. But here's the shocker you might never have heard. Jesus speaks to you now. And what he says is that not everything that seems dead is finished. When you say it's over, God whispers, not yet. The story of Lazarus did not end at the tombstone. The voice of Jesus surpassed the limits of death, broke the silence of mourning, and gave an order. Lazarus, come out. What does this mean? It means that even when everything seems over, Jesus can still call his name and reverse what no one else believes. Because with him, the end is not the end. And perhaps today, its end has another name. It could be a diagnosis, a bankruptcy, an emotional loss, a broken faith, a dying marriage, an erased dream. But listen, the same Jesus who stood before Lazarus' tomb now stands before you, and he doesn't look at your situation with pity. He looks with power. He's not late. He arrives at the exact time for the miracle to glorify the Father. If you feel like you are at your limit, comment now, Jesus, call my name, because there is power in your confession, there is life in your faith, and there is resurrection in his presence. The fear of the end loses its power when you remember that you walk with the one who conquered death. Jesus doesn't just bring life, he is life. And when he enters your story, what seemed sealed can be reopened, written with glory. It's no coincidence that you're here now reading this. There is something inside you that still pulses, even among the rubble of pain. And do you know what it is? It is the voice of God calling you back. It's the divine breath moving into the areas where you had already given up. Because Jesus doesn't need much space to act. He just needs a heart willing to trust once again. And even if everything inside you says there is no more hope, listen to this carefully. The greatest miracle happens at the moment when everything seems lost. It is at this time that he reveals himself as the resurrection that defies the natural and the life that renews the impossible. And now, take a deep breath. Allow yourself to feel this word entering like light in a dark place. Imagine Jesus looking you in the eye and saying firmly and tenderly, take away the stone. Yes, he is asking you for courage to remove what you have placed as a barrier. The hurt, the fear, the shame, the doubt, because the stone only comes out with your consent. And when you take it out, he comes in, and when he enters, everything changes. If this message sparked something in your heart, write in the comments, I believe in the life that Jesus brings. Your testimony could be the spark that reignites someone else's hope. It could be the confirmation someone was begging God to receive. And more than that, it could be the beginning of a new phase of your own journey, because when you stand in faith, heaven moves toward you. And here's something no one has ever told you. Just because it hurts doesn't mean it's over. It's not because it's dark that God isn't acting. Heaven works in the invisible, and what is being prepared far from your eyes will soon explode before you in the form of a miracle. What you're about to discover will change the way you see everything, because the next encounter is with someone who seemed weak, but understood that it was exactly in their weakness that God would show himself strong. Paul had already experienced the supernatural, preached to thousands, planted churches, resisted persecution, hunger, beatings, and prisons. But there was something he couldn't overcome. A thorn. We don't know exactly what it was: illness, physical torment, emotional battle. But we know it was deep enough to cause him to cry out to the Lord 3 times, "Take this away from me." And God's answer was disconcerting but revealing, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9. What Paul saw as a limitation, God saw as a platform for manifestation. What he wanted to remove, God wanted to use, because God's strength only truly shines when our strength runs out. Have you ever felt weak? Have you ever looked at yourself and thought, "I can't do it. I can't handle it. I'm not strong enough to face this"? Maybe today is exactly how you are feeling. The fear of not being strong enough accompanies you in silence, while you wear armor in front of people, but inside you are in pieces. You pray, but the anxiety remains. You believe, but doubt returns. You even try to get up, but the weight of life pushes you back to the ground. And then comes that corrosive thought: if I were stronger, more spiritual, more steadfast, maybe all this wouldn't be happening. But what if I told you that it is precisely because you are weak that God is closer than ever? Jesus speaks to you now, not to demand more strength, but to remind you of a truth that can free your soul. God doesn't need you to be strong. He just needs you to surrender. Yes, that's right. The biggest deception that fear brings is to make us think that faith is a performance of strength. But in truth, faith is an act of surrender. When you recognize that you can't do it alone, you make room for God to show you who He is. The miracle begins when your strength ends. The sky moves when your surrender is genuine. Paul understood this. He learned to glory in his weaknesses because it was in them that the strength of Christ rested upon him. That changes everything, doesn't it? If this word is touching your heart right now, comment, "In my weakness, Jesus is my strength," because your written testimony could be the answer someone has been waiting for. What's more, declaring this publicly is an act of faith that breaks the cycle of fear and paves the way for trust. You no longer have to carry this weight alone. God's grace sustains you. The presence of Jesus strengthens you. And even when your hands shake, His arm holds you steady. And here comes a revelation that could turn the key in your heart. What weakens you today could be exactly what will make you stronger tomorrow. Paul's thorn was not removed, but it became the greatest testimony of his dependence. What if your weakness today is the seed of tomorrow's anointing? What if what you're facing now is the stage for your next move? God uses what the world despises. He turns pain into glory, limitation on authority, fragility and purpose. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine Jesus telling you, tenderly but with authority, "Don't give up. It is now that my power will manifest itself." And that's when you realize it wasn't about your strength. It never was. It has always been about His strength in you. And that changes absolutely everything. But that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. Because there is a silent pain that many face and do not have the courage to talk about. That of feeling forgotten by God. And what comes next will touch the depths of your soul. She prayed in silence. Her lips moved, but no words came out. Anna was in the temple kneeling with her heart in tatters, feeling invisible. That pain that gnaws away in silence. The pain of those who pray and see no answer, of those who cry out and only hear the echo of their own voice. Year after year, she went up to Shiloh. Year after year, she returned empty-handed. Others around laughed, celebrated, showed off their achievements. Children fulfilled promises. And Anna remained on hold. When everyone had forgotten her pain, she still prayed. When everyone had stopped believing, she still hoped. But deep down, even with faith, Anna also felt forgotten by God. Have you ever felt this way? Like you're doing everything right, but still nothing happens. Like your prayers are stuck in the ceiling? As if God turned away and left you talking to yourself? This is one of the most suffocating pains of the soul. The feeling of being ignored by heaven itself. You keep going to church, you keep serving, you keep struggling to trust. But there are days when it seems like God just forgot. And when that thought invades you, fear takes over. Is he really listening? Am I alone in this fight? Is there something wrong with me? But here is a truth that can revolutionize your heart. God's silence is not absence, it's preparation. What you interpret as forgetfulness, God calls construction, because even when you don't feel it, he is working. Even when there is no visible sign, he is writing something that goes beyond what you can imagine. Anna didn't know, but her cry wasn't just about her. The answer God was preparing was not just a son, he was a prophet. It was Samuel, the man who would anoint kings, the man who would change the history of a nation. When God responded to Anna, he not only remembered her, he inserted her into the eternal plan. Jesus speaks to you now and says, I remember every tear. No prayer was ignored. I'm acting even in silence. Don't allow fear to convince you that heaven has abandoned you. The weight you experience today is the fertile soil where the miracle will flourish. God does not forget. God does not fail. And his timing, no matter how painful it may seem, is always perfect. If this message spoke directly to your soul, comment now, Lord, I know that your timing is perfect. This written statement can be like Hannah's prayer, a public cry that moves the heart of God. And it could also be the confirmation that someone else, lost in the silence, needed to read today. You have no idea how many lives a simple sentence can touch. Confess. Declare. Faith grows when it is shared. And perhaps, as you read this now, you are remembering old promises, things that you even stopped praying about because you thought God had already forgotten. But what if I told you that nothing is lost, that what you prayed for in tears, God still has recorded in heaven, that your name is before him and the time of response is approaching? There is a secret hidden in this story, and few know this truth. The time of silence is where God tests your faith to prepare your victory, because when the answer arrives, after so much time, so much waiting, so much pain, it comes loaded with purpose, maturity, and impact. Anna not only had Samuel, she had the honor of seeing her humiliation turned into exaltation. Peninnah, who mocked her, saw with her own eyes God's favor transforming shame into honor. God has not forgotten. God remembered, and that's what he's saying to you today. You are not forgotten. What you sowed in prayer will flourish. What you sowed in tears, you will reap in joy. And when it happens, you will understand it was worth the wait. But that's not all. Something even more surprising is about to be revealed. Because the fear of trusting God and being disappointed has paralyzed many hearts, and what happens next will confront that pain at its root. It was hard to believe. The other disciples had already seen it. They had played, they had heard his voice, they had cried and then laughed again. But Thomas wasn't there. And no matter how much everyone around him swore that Jesus had risen, his heart was trapped in doubt, in fear, in the pain of surrendering again and being disappointed. He had seen the Master die. And now, how to trust again? How do you open your heart when everything inside you says, don't get hurt again? The fear of trusting and falling again, the fear of believing and being torn apart. If I don't see it, if I don't touch it, I won't believe it. Thomas, in fact, was not asking for proof. He was trying to protect himself. How many times have you done this too? Faced with the promise of something new, something better, you retreat, you doubt. You tell yourself it's caution, but inside you know it's trauma. An old fear, perhaps not fully conscious, but that prevents you from fully trusting. Because it hurt too much before. Because you already surrendered, you already believed. And you fell, this fear paralyzes. And the worst thing is that he wears the clothes of prudence, but it is a shield made of unhealed wounds. You say you need reassurance. But deep down, he's just trying to avoid another disappointment. The disappointment of being left, of seeing what you expected not happen. The pain of realizing that once again he gave his all, and it wasn't enough. But Jesus knows this fear. And that's why he doesn't condemn Thomas. He doesn't come shouting. He doesn't come judging. He appears, he shows himself. He says, high five. Because Jesus is not afraid of your doubt. It breaks through the wall of your closed heart and says, I'm here. I still choose you even when you're insecure. Jesus speaks to you now and says, your doubt does not drive me away. I am calling you to trust, not punishment, because trusting again is not ignoring the wounds. It is allowing Jesus to enter them with love, with grace, with truth. Thomas saw it. And at that moment, he fell to his knees and said, my Lord and my God. The biggest worshiper in the group was precisely the one who doubted the most. If this message found your heart, comment now, Jesus, I trust in you, even without seeing it. This simple phrase can be the first step in breaking the invisible chains that fear has placed on your faith. It could be the silent cry that God has been waiting to act with power in your life. And if this word touched your soul deeply, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Your gesture of faith can be the bridge that takes this message to another life that also needs to trust again. You don't need to have all the answers to take a leap of faith. What Jesus wants from you today is not perfect faith, but real surrender. He understands your fear. He sees your history, but he also sees your future and wants to lead you to something that goes beyond pain. After all, the greatest miracles happen when we dare to believe without seeing. And this boldness, even shy, even trembling inside, is what moves the sky. But that's not all. What comes next will break the deepest chains of fear, because when the heart learns to trust, the spirit is free to fly. The ground was cold, the air heavy and damp, chains on the feet, open wounds on the body, and a steely silence in the eyes of the guards. No hope in sight. It was deep night in the prison of Philippi when Paul and Silas, unjustly imprisoned for freeing a young woman from an evil spirit, decided to do the unthinkable: praise. Instead of complaining, sing. Instead of giving in to fear, trust. And they sang loudly in the dark, in the tightness, in the pain, because there was something there stronger than fear, an unshakable confidence that, even in prison, God was still in control. The cell did not limit them. The steel didn't stop them. Fear did not paralyze them. They knew that trusting God does not mean the absence of suffering, but the guaranteed presence of hope. And as their voices echoed in that place of despair, something supernatural happened, an earthquake. But not just any earthquake, a move of God. The chains were broken, the doors were opened, and all the prisoners were freed. This is the final key that unlocks the last handcuffs. Trust. Not blind trust, but trust built on relationship, on experience, on total surrender. When you trust, even within your emotional prison, even under the weight of anxiety, even drowned by the fear of not being able to get out, you praise. And when he praises, the sky moves. Maybe today you feel trapped, surrounded by doubts, pain, memories that scream that you won't make it. But Jesus speaks to you now. Trust in me. Sing even in tears. Praise even when trembling. Surrender even without knowing what will come next. Because what breaks chains is not the strength of your will, but the strength of your worship. And do you know what impresses most about this story? Paul and Silas did not praise to be freed. They praised because they knew who the God was, who was with them inside. And this is the liberation that goes beyond the visible chains, the one that happens first in the heart. True trust doesn't start when the door opens. It begins when you decide, even shakily, to trust before seeing any change. If this word spoke to you, write now in the comments, "My trust is in Jesus," because your declaration of faith may be the first sound that will shake the structures of the emotional prison where you find yourself. It could be the spark that ignites a new era in your life. And if this message touched your heart, click the like button and subscribe to the channel. This is not just a digital gesture, it is a spiritual step. With just one click, you help this word reach someone who may be silent inside a prison, crying out for release. Don't underestimate the power of the confidence that praises in the dark. Because this is the confidence that opens paths where there is no way out, that makes hope sprout where everything seemed dry, that lifts you from the depths where you swore your end would be. Jesus speaks to you, and he says, "I'm here." The chains no longer have power over you. Sing trust, and see what I'm going to do, because when trust is complete, freedom is inevitable. You've come this far, and this is no coincidence. It's because deep inside you there is a thirst, a silent scream that perhaps no one heard, but God heard. He saw you, accompanied you on every part of this journey, and brought you to this moment. Perhaps for the first time in a long time, you felt something move inside you, a rekindled hope, a weight coming off your chest, fear losing strength. And do you know why? Because Jesus speaks to you. And when he speaks, chains break, prisons open, and the impossible begins to happen. You heard stories, verses, teachings, but they weren't just words. They were spiritual keys. Each of them was placed in your hands to unlock the cells of fear, pain, doubt, anxiety. And now the time has come to seal it all. Because it's not enough to just listen. It needs to be declared. Pray, deliver. To receive true transformation begins when you position yourself spiritually and say, "Jesus, I trust you, even though I don't understand." Then close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. Feel you are not alone. Jesus speaks to you now, here, and what he is about to do is beyond what you can imagine. Let's pray together. Lord God, at this moment I join my voice with that of the person who came this far. You know, Father, how much she has fought, how much she has hidden her tears, how much fear has tried to dominate her. But today, Lord, we declare deliverance. In the name of Jesus, may every emotional prison fall to the ground. May all silent anxiety be dissolved by your peace. May the paralyzing fear be replaced by supernatural courage. Father, may this person feel your presence in a palpable way now. Let her know that she's not alone, that she was chosen, that she is being restored. I declare over her the promise of 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and self-control. May she rise today free, healed, confident. In the name of Jesus, we seal this release. Amen. If you've come this far, it's because God is working in your life. Do not ignore this call. There is something much bigger waiting for you. But the journey doesn't end now. It's just beginning. What you will discover in the video that is on screen now could change your life even more. Don't leave without watching, because what comes next could be just what was needed for your complete liberation. Comment now, "I made it to the end." This is more than a comment. It is a spiritual statement, a milestone of your perseverance, of your thirst for change. It can also be the phrase that encourages another soul to continue. Share this video with someone you know is trapped inside themselves. You can be the channel that God will use to transform an entire story. And if this message really touched you, subscribe to the channel. Not just for me, but for you. To continue being spiritually fed, to no longer walk alone. By subscribing, you help us reach others who also need to hear Jesus speaking to them. Your faith feeds a current of transformation, but those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They will run and not be weary. They will walk and not be weary. Isaiah 40:31. See you in the next video. And may it be the continuation of the miracle that started here, because your liberation has already begun.